Hey, everybody. Welcome to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. I'm Kristi Brower, here with my co host, Katie Weaver. Hey, Katie.
Hello.
How are you?
Well, I'm well. I'm like 15 days into this quarantine business and
Right.
feeling just a little done with this shit, but I'm being a good girl and doing what I'm supposed to. So,
Boy, do I feel you.
yeah.
It's been a great time to binge a lot of true crime documentaries. I have to
Yeah.
admit, I
hmm
have watched a lot.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I kind of had to get my head together this morning about this case. Like, I need to not mix it up with some of the other ones I've been watching, watched so many lately. Oh my gosh, it's gotten so
Yeah.
intense. But we're really excited. We're going to be covering Maura Murray this
Yeah.
morning. And I don't know. I think maybe we ought to just jump right into it.
Yeah.
So let's do that. So Maura Murray went missing on Monday, February 9th, 2004. Now, you have heard this story a lot of times. You may have watched the
hmm
documentaries about it. There's a lot out there. So,
Yeah.
what we're going to do slightly differently is I'm going to cover the timeline and then I'm going to cover some of the backstory so that you know the story. So, if you don't know Maura Murray, you will know the story. But then we're going to kind of play a ask the psychic true or false kind of game with Katie. And I'm going to put a bunch of theories to Katie and have her tell us what her hit is about whether the theories are true or not. This, of course, is an unsolved case. It's still just classified as a missing persons case, even though, she's been missing for 16 years. So I
Yeah.
think she's not coming back, but we'll
Yeah.
get to that. So Maura Murray was a college student. She was in studying nursing, and at around midnight on the 9th of February 2004, she uses MapQuest to search directions to the Berkshires and Burlington, Vermont. Remember MapQuest, Katie?
Yeah.
Seems like 100 years ago that anyone would have used a MapQuest, but this was back in
Right.
2004 before her cell
hmm
phone had GPS. So
Well, she had a flip phone, in fact.
yes, she did, like most of us did back then. Okay.
Right.
So she searches directions for these places, which are places that she was very familiar with. She had been many times with her family, favorite vacation spot. So it seems like
hmm
she's looking to go maybe there.
hmm
That same day, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, she emails her boyfriend and says, I got your messages. This is her boyfriend, Bill. But honestly, I didn't feel like talking to much of anyone. I promised to call today, though. They had a pretty rocky relationship and were really struggling at that time. Things were not going
hmm
well between them, and she was avoiding him. And so she didn't really want to talk to him that day. She also, about that same time, made some phone calls inquiring about renting a condominium at the same Bartlett, New Hampshire condo where her family had vacationed many times before.
hmm
She didn't rent a condo, but she called and asked about renting a condo.
Yeah.
Okay, so then about 1:13 p.m. that day, she calls a fellow nursing student, and we still don't know why she made that phone call or what that was about. At 1:24 p.m. that day, she emailed a work supervisor at the nursing school where she was at, and she said she would be out of town for a week because there had been a death in her family.
Right.
Now, this was a lie. There was no
Right.
death in her family, but she was
No.
getting herself off the hook for a week.
A week. Yeah, that was news to her family. Yeah.
Yeah, her family had no idea what that was about. Then at 2:05 p.m., she called a number about booking hotels in Stowe, Vermont. So she's looking in these places, she's looking to go to Vermont, obviously, hasn't
Mhm.
found a place to stay yet. At 2:18, she did call her boyfriend and left a voice message that she would talk to him later. And somewhere around that time, she packed a bunch of stuff into her car: clothing, toiletries, her textbooks, her birth control. So a
Mhm.
bunch of stuff. Like she was headed out of town.
Yeah.
Later, they would discover that in her apartment, most of her belongings were packed in boxes. Now, I've heard a lot of theories around this one that she had not lived in that apartment for very long, and it may have been that she just hadn't unpacked yet.
Mhm.
Maybe it was she was leaving. Nobody's really sure. But here's where we kind of get where we know her very last movements. So at 3:40 p.m., she takes $280 out of an ATM. There's closed circuit footage that shows she was alone. But okay, so this is one of those ATMs that it's its own little building.
Mhm.
And the footage is just stills taken like every 3 seconds, and
Mhm.
it doesn't show outside of the building. And so
Right.
there's no one in with her in the building, doesn't necessarily show that there isn't anyone in the car with her. So we don't know.
Mhm.
Then she goes to a nearby liquor store and buys $40 worth of alcohol,
Mhm.
and that she did go alone into that store as well. There's footage of that as well. And also at some point, she went to the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles because, and we'll get into this when we get into the backstory a bit, but she had wrecked her dad's car just a couple of days prior to this. And so she needed to file an accident report.
Yeah.
So then she leaves Amherst, Massachusetts between 4 and 5 p.m., they believe, on Interstate 91 North. At 4:37, she calls to check her voicemail, which is the last recorded use of her cell phone. As far as they know, she didn't tell anybody where she was going. No one in her family, none of her friends, her boyfriend, no one knew that she was taking off and that she had
Mhm.
bowed out of school for a week.
Mhm.
So, sometime after 7 p.m., a Woodsville, New Hampshire resident, they heard this thump outside of their house. So this is where she was around this area, Woodsville or Haverhill. When she looks out the window of her house, she can see that there's a car out there that has bumped into a snowbank. Now, this is on Route 112, which is known as Wild Amanusic Road. I think I said that right. I hope I said that right.
Okay.
So she looks out the window. She sees this car has ran into a snowbank. So about 7:27, she calls the police to report that there's been an accident. Initially, it was said that she saw a man smoking a cigarette inside the car. Later, she says that what she saw was a red light, which you might think was a cigarette, right? Or maybe it was from a cell phone, or maybe it was from the stereo of the car. She saw a red light in the car, and somehow that made everyone think for a while that there was someone in the car with her.
Mhm.
Um, so then a neighbor pulls up alongside the vehicle, and this is a neighbor that drives a school bus.
Yeah.
And so he pulls up alongside of her, talks to her for a minute. She's not injured, though airbags have deployed. So she did hit hard enough that it deployed the airbags in her car.
Mhm.
She asked, he said, "Let me call somebody for help." And she said, "No, please don't." Um, and so she said she'd already called AAA.
Mhm.
Now, that call didn't happen because in this stretch of this highway, there's no cell service.
Yeah.
So she could not have called AAA. But there was a reason why she did not call the police. She did not want anyone else to call the police. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But I just want to get through the
Mhm.
timeline first. Um, so the neighbor does call the sheriff's department because he thinks it's weird. He knows that she can't call AAA.
Right.
So he also calls the police. Um, And then there was another, let's see, someone else driving home from work says she passed the scene at 7:37, and that's when she saw a police SUV parked face to face with her car. She pulled over, didn't see anybody standing outside or looking like they needed help, so she didn't do anything about it. She just
Yeah.
kept on going. And there was some controversy about that and about that car. That's totally been solved. That was just one of the local sheriffs coming, and then a police officer came as well. So the Haverhill police officer uh, arrived on the scene at 7:46. So he was
Yeah.
the first one there, and then a second police officer also came. So they find that the car has hit a tree on the driver's side of the vehicle, and it damaged the left headlight, had pushed the car's radiator into the fan. I mean, it was not drivable.
Mhm.
Um, the the car's windshield was cracked on the driver's side, and the airbags had been deployed. And the car was also locked. So there's no one in the car. The car
Mhm.
is locked.
Yeah.
They discover that there are red wine stains inside and outside the car. They find a box of Franzia wine on the rear seat, and they're pretty sure that that was the part of the accident.
Right.
They find a bunch of her belongings in there, makeup and jewelry and the driving directions to Burlington, Vermont. Remember the MapQuest directions? Her favorite stuffed animal and a bunch of stuff. A lot of things were there. Things that were not there was her phone and debit card. So wherever
Mhm.
she went, those things were on her. They also think some of the alcohol that she bought was missing.
Mhm.
And they found a soda bottle that smelled like alcohol that they really think she'd been drinking while she was driving.
Mm.
So at this point, they have this car. It's wrecked into a snowbank. It's locked with, the owner's belongings in it. And there is no Maura to be seen. They cannot find her anywhere. And so they start looking for her. Obviously they go up and down the roads looking for her. It had, this is winter. There's snow on the ground. There are no tracks heading off into the woods on either side of the road. They go down this other little track that is kind of just a very partial road. No footprints there either. It's literally like she just vanished off the face of the earth.
Mhm.
They drive around searching for her. The search lasts for a long, long time, and they spread it out further and further and further, and they don't find anything. The only thing they find when they tow the car in to have it forensically searched is that there is a rag stuffed up the muffler on the car,
Mhm.
which is very interesting. And this gets into my theory about what happened.
Mhm.
So they start referring to her as missing, and they start looking for her. And her family comes, her boyfriend comes. I mean, they look for her. They look for her for weeks.
Mhm.
They find zero, no evidence of her at all. Nothing. It
Mhm.
is literally like she disappeared into thin air. Now we know she didn't, because
Mhm.
nobody disappears into thin air, and we're going to talk about what some of our theories are. But I want to talk a little bit about the background on this case, because I think some things that are um, really important to know about Mara. So
Yeah.
Mara, before being a nursing student in Amherst, she was at West Point.
Right.
She came from, her dad was in the military. She was raised by her mother mostly. Her parents divorced when she was 6.
Mhm.
But she was a star athlete on the school's track team. She and her
Yeah.
sister both were star athletes, and they were hardcore overachievers, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You know the type, get straight A's in everything, work
Mhm.
really, really hard, are struggling a great deal, to
Mhm.
always be the best and be better and be more. So, in the midst of all of that, she gets admitted to West Point, and she goes to West Point for 3 semesters. She was studying chemical engineering there at the time.
Mhm.
But after her freshman year, she transferred to the University of Massachusetts in Amherst to study nursing. Now, there's a really important thing that happens with Mara that caused this, and I think is a good indication of, from a psychological standpoint, I can never help but look at this also psychologically as well as
Sure.
psychically, because I'm a social worker.
Mhm.
So she stole some makeup from the commissary at Fort Knox. Now, y'all know the jokes about Fort Knox. Like, it's the most
Right.
secure military base on the planet of Earth. And she stole $5 worth of makeup from their commissary and was immediately busted. Um, So this was considered an honor code violation. So rather than officially expelling her, they let her transfer to UMass in Amherst to the
Mhm.
nursing program there. So this is kind of the first indication that maybe things aren't going that great in her life.
Yeah.
She told her friend who was with her at the time she has no idea why she did it. She had the money in her pocket to pay for what she took. She just
Yeah.
did it. Um, so so she goes to UMass in the nursing program. In November of 2003, which is a few months before she disappeared, she gets busted for using a stolen credit card to order food, like from pizza places.
Mhm.
And she was busted in a sting with the police. She was charged, but she had this they basically gave her this way out that if she had 3 months of good behavior and didn't get into any trouble, that the charge wouldn't go onto her record,
Uh-huh.
basically. So for the second time, she kind of gets bailed out of
Yeah.
some really petty, bizarre criminal behavior.
Yeah.
So a couple of things to think about. The night before she went missing, she wrecked her dad's brand new car on the way home from a party. likely had been drinking. There's a
Yeah.
lot of talk from everybody in her life that alcohol had become a
Yeah.
problem for her.
Mhm.
Well, she was terrified because she knows if she gets in trouble during
Mhm.
this 3-month period, she's in big trouble. She's going to have real charges on her record.
Yeah.
If you know anything about working,
Nursing might be out the window. Yeah.
right, if you're working in healthcare and you have, you have to pass background checks. You can't. It's just like being a social worker. You can't, and a daycare provider when you were
Yeah.
doing daycare. You
Oh, yeah.
can't have things on your
Can't be
record like
doing
that.
stuff like that. Yeah.
No, so she was really really upset. She also done some serious damage, like $9,000 worth of damage to her dad's brand new car.
Yeah.
Now, you got to know her dad was tremendously hard on her. And I'm not saying this to blame him in any way. It's just this is how she grew up. She grew
Yeah.
up with this dad that expected the best out of her and everything that she had done. And she was failing. She'd been in trouble with the law twice. She'd had to change schools. She didn't make it at West Point. She's already not doing so hot. Then
Yeah.
she wrecks her dad's car. So they don't call the police when she wrecks her dad's car. And he says, I want you to get an accident report from the police and just fill it out. She
Mhm.
wasn't in a wreck with anyone else. And we'll claim it on the insurance, but we won't involve the police, to protect her, right?
Right.
So then when this accident happens on the night that she disappears, again, she's begging the guy who stops to help her, please don't call the police. Because again, here she is,
Yeah.
another time, likely alcohol involved, single car accident, and
Mhm.
they're very common, an accident like that when someone's drinking, to just hit a snowbank or hit a tree or hit something,
Yeah.
because they're not, because they're impaired.
Right.
So, this gives you some idea of her mindset. She's not in a good place in her head.
No.
Now, let's see. The other thing that happened, so just a couple of days before this all happened, she had a phone call with her older sister, Kathleen, while she was on duty at work. She was a campus security guard. And they talked about some problems that were going on with Kathleen. It finally came out in the last documentary that I watched. Kathleen finally admits what happened on that call that got her so upset, because after that call, Maura got so upset that her supervisor had to take her home. She could not stay at work. She was just a mess.
Mhm.
And all she could say to her supervisor was, my sister. Well, sister has a pretty serious alcohol and drug problem and a pretty long history of an abusive relationship. And she had just gotten out of rehab. And in
Mhm.
that phone call, she admits to Maura that she's drinking again. And Maura just melts down. Like,
Mhm.
this is her older sister. They're like best friends. They're very close. She's close to all of her siblings, but she's very close,
Mhm.
particularly to Kathleen. And so it's believed that she just really, like, this was just one more weight on her that she couldn't take. And so
Mhm.
she was just kind of melted down in that moment, and was really, really upset. So this is the weekend before she goes missing.
Yeah.
So she discovers that this is happening um, with her sister. Then her dad comes to visit.
Mhm.
And he's taking her car shopping because her car is not in good shape and she's having a lot of problems
Yeah.
with it. And they're thinking of um, getting her another car. But
Yeah.
then, so that night, she goes to a party. Her dad says, here, take my car since your car's not in the greatest of shape. And she hits a guardrail and
Yeah.
causes, like $9,000 worth of damage to his car. So this is just, the stress is piling, right? Can you just feel the pressure
Yeah.
building on this girl? Because I can.
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like, when she stole from Fort Knox, I feel like, and I've seen this before in people when they're just stressed beyond their capabilities.
Yeah.
Sometimes they lash out and act out in really weird ways. It's just this, using the stolen credit card, same thing.
Mhm.
This is a stress response. She's not thinking clearly. She's really not in a good place mentally.
Yeah.
Then in the midst of all of this, you find out that there's been some infidelity in her relationship on his part,
Mhm.
but also on hers.
Yeah.
And they are like pre-engaged, and I don't know, the family doesn't love him. They are pretty lukewarm on him, and
Mhm.
kind of always felt like she would be better off without him. But so there's that stress. There's just the stress of being in nursing school, which I can only
Yeah.
imagine. And then there's the drinking that is obviously becoming a problem in her life, plus the stress of her sister, her dad, the car, the legal
Yeah.
stuff. Like she's just at a breaking point.
Mhm.
Right. And so then she takes off, like she's just going to leave for a week and like, I'm just going to get the hell out and get out of here. So that is basically the story. I mean, we can go
Mhm.
into, I mean, this is a long, huge story.
Yeah.
And there have been zillions of hours of research done. But I want to play quiz the psychic here for a minute, and we'll do the
Okay.
psychic analysis afterward. But let's play quiz the psychic first. I'm going to ask you some questions about various elements that have come up in this case, and I want you to just tell us what your hit is.
Okay.
So one of the accusations made is that her dad, Fred, was involved. Do you think Fred Murray was involved in her disappearance?
I do not. That doesn't
Okay.
resonate with me at all.
Okay. Another theory is that her boyfriend Bill was somehow involved.
No.
Okay. Bill, by the way, was 1,700 miles away. There was no
Yeah.
way that he was, but that was
No.
questioned. There are accusations all over the internet, and people have gone crazy with this case. Like,
Yeah.
you know, if you just think it's your theory, then you share it out there in the world like it's real, and it's very hurtful to
Right.
people.
And
one
people
of them-
grab it and run with it. Yeah.
Right. One of the theories out there is that Fred had molested Maura as a child.
I don't believe that. That doesn't resonate as true. And you know, in psychic work, their sexual abuse has a really distinct feeling. It almost has like a psychic smell, if that makes any sense. Like you
Yeah.
really know that. And I don't see that at all. I
Yeah.
think Fred was really actually a good dad.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that he knew how to be a good dad. You know,
Yeah.
he was very intense. Yes. He put too much pressure on his kids. Yes. Those things are absolutely true.
Yeah.
But he loved his kids. He was, you know, he was trying to be a good dad and just, you know, help his kids achieve all that they could. And maybe he was a little tone deaf, obviously, to some of their challenges, but he wasn't molesting his kids. I don't believe that to be true.
Okay. Okay. So shortly after this happened, there was an interview with Fred.
Mm-hmm.
And Fred, I got to say, Fred didn't handle any of this particularly well. And I do not blame him at all, because I don't think I would either. Like you cannot criticize someone whose daughter just went missing and think, you know, and pick apart every single thing that he said. But he did say in an interview that maybe she just had enough of everything and went on a squaw walk. And what he meant by that was that she went out into the woods and died.
Uh-huh.
That then of course blew up, and then everybody in the media was like, well, she was suicidal, and so she probably just walked off from the car and killed herself in the woods. And so I want your psychic impression here. Did Maura Murray kill herself?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't believe she did. First of all, they didn't find any footprints or any evidence of her walking out into the woods. But secondly, she knew better. She knew better. She wasn't going to do that. I don't feel like that's what happened at all.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay, so here's another one. Some theories are that she simply walked away from the accident and walked away from her life and just started over. 16 years later, no one who ever knew her has ever heard from her again. Some people think she went to Canada. Do you think that that's true?
Maura Murray is dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't believe that that's the case at all. I think things went very sideways, and that she was not, I mean, I have a theory, you know, that we'll get into, but I don't feel like that's the case. She was too close, especially to her sister, Kathleen.
Yeah.
I just don't think she would have just abandoned her like that at all, even in the mindset she was in. I mean, this girl was extremely bright. She was brilliant, you know, and not that, you know, not that stupid people do stupid things or whatever. I mean, I don't know why, but I said that, except for that. I feel like if she had done that, she would have at some point gotten grounded enough to recognize that her family needed her. You know, I just don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that's the case. And I absolutely fully believe that she's demised. So,
yeah. Okay, good. So those are the main theories that I want to get into. But then I want to move into the psychic analysis so I can tell you my theory. I want to hear your theory. So we're just going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll come back with the psychic analysis.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome back to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. We are here talking about the Maura Murray case. And we've gone through the timeline, we've gone through the main theories. Now we get to ourselves as intuitives when we look at
Mhm.
this case. What do we think happened? So I want to
Mhm.
share what I think happened, my
Mhm.
sense is, because I've worked on this a lot this week, quarantined at home, right? I already work at home, but I'm also quarantined at home. So I've worked
Mhm.
on this a lot. And here's my sense of this. One of the things that misleads this timeline is that she took money out of her ATM, and so she had cash. And
Yeah.
so there are things that we don't know about when she left Amherst to when she got to Haverhill, the things that she did and where was she, and there's some time lost in there. Like if you just drive straight from Amherst to Haverhill, there's an hour or two missing.
Yeah.
I think she met up with some people. I don't know that it was
Mhm.
people that she really knew before, but I feel like she went to like a bar. That she stopped at a bar, that she met some people, that she talked to some people, she talked to some men. I feel like she left there intoxicated. I feel like she left there vulnerable.
Mhm.
She came off as vulnerable in the situation.
Mhm.
I feel like the rag in the tailpipe of her car is really significant.
Mhm.
If you put the rag in the tailpipe of a car and you drive it for long enough, it will shut itself off because the carbon monoxide builds up inside or something. It does something mechanically that it will
Mhm.
stop the car, basically. I feel like her car was sabotaged, and I
Mhm.
feel like she was being followed.
Mhm.
Every time I tune into this situation, there is a car behind her that
Yep.
and it's multiple people. It's 3 or 4 men
Mhm.
that are in this car. I feel like that the car did not shut off because of the exhaust. I feel like she wrecked it first
Mhm.
because she was too intoxicated to be driving.
She was.
I feel like she got out of the car. Here's the neighbor. They're talking about calling the police. She's panicking because she knows she's going to be in big trouble if she gets another charge. Here come these guys accidentally
Mhm.
in their car who she was just at the bar with. She feels a little bit of trust with them because she talked to them. Also, she's intoxicated, so
Mhm.
she's not making great choices. They say, "Hey, just get in with us. Let's get you out of here. We'll figure it out later, but you don't have to stay."
Yeah.
I feel like she got in the car with them,
Mhm.
and I feel like she was raped and murdered, and that she was raped and murdered that night,
Yeah.
and that her body is hidden. And we're talking about a place that's quite wooded,
Oh
and there
yeah.
are a lot of places that a body could be hidden. And because we have no there were no witnesses to that. Like there were
Right.
people who saw the accident, but these people were busy calling the police while there were just a few minutes. It's literally like 3 or 4 minutes of
Yep.
time when no one was looking at her. But if there was a car not far behind her that just came up and said, "Hey, jump in," and she jumped
Mhm.
in, it could take 20 seconds to do
Right.
that. Boom, they're gone. No one ever knows.
And
That
she
is
knew them.
truly
She knew them.
yes.
So they
Yep.
didn't have to talk her into the car. They were
No, she was
saving
like,
her.
"Oh, I'm in trouble. I'm getting in with you. I'll tell you the story as we go." You
Yeah.
know, I totally I have no doubt that that is exactly what happened. They took her somewhere.
Mhm.
They had already been planning to follow her and had attempted to set her up, and that's what the rag in the tailpipe was
Mhm.
about. And that she was raped and killed, and that she was killed that night.
Yeah.
I don't feel like she lived any, more than an hour or two beyond when that all happened.
Mhm.
And because no one knows who that is that took her, and the focus was so heavily on her just the focus was all on her having walked away from her car.
Right.
There really was no police work done on the other possible elements here, and
Right.
now it may be too late. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. Maybe there's lots of stuff still going on with this case and a lot of investigating still going on, but I really do believe that her body has been concealed somewhere,
Yeah.
and that there are individuals in that community that know what happened.
Mhm.
And some of them have taunted there are a couple of podcasters that have done a huge Maura Murray podcast that's like 40 episodes or something. And there's
Mhm.
someone that has taunted them for a long time with emails, with
Mhm.
information, false information, threats, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I feel like someone knows. and
Yeah.
that this was very much perpetrated by local people in that
Mhm.
Haverhill area. And that, if somebody finally breaks down and decides to tell the truth, that's how we're going to know what happened to Maura Murray. So that's
Mhm.
my psychic analysis, is that she was
Mhm.
followed from a bar. It was a setup. They knew what they were going to do the whole time.
Mhm. I absolutely agree. That is very similar to the hit that I had. I'm going to add one more layer to it. Well, two, but I absolutely agree with that. It was so easy to just pull up, and she just hopped right in their car. So
Yeah.
easy. She
Yeah.
left her stuff because she thought she would be coming back for it.
Yeah.
This was just another bailout for her of, driving drunk or getting caught doing something.
Yep.
This was a normal thing for her. And I feel like it was so easy to hop in that car.
Yeah.
So, two things come up for me. I actually believe that there was a man that she was involved with that was supposed to be meeting her wherever she was going. I
Ah,
feel like
okay.
she was going and he would meet up with her like the next day or whatnot when she secured a room and figured out exactly where she wanted to go. She was
Mhm.
she was going blind. She hadn't gotten a place. She couldn't make up her mind. She wasn't sure what she wanted. She was just going to show up in that community and find a place. And that was
Mhm.
her plan. There was a man that I feel like was associated with the hospital where she was working and going to school that
Mhm.
was supposed to be meeting her. But then I actually feel like this person may have been married. Like this was an affair that was happening that was really on the DL. And I feel
Mhm.
like he didn't come forward and say shit because he didn't want to implicate himself in any way. He didn't actually do
Right.
anything, but she was supposed to get to where she was going, let him know he was going to come and meet her where she was. So
Mhm.
it was kind of a twofold. I have to run away from my life, but also she wanted to, create this space with this person. I feel like he was a high level employee where she worked. Right? He was an
Mhm.
administrator of some point or of some kind or a doctor or whatnot, but somebody who had some authority that was also kind of working her, along the lines of, you know, encouraging her to take this break, in other words. So, but I feel like once she disappeared, then of course they felt really guilty because they urged her to take this trip and also, of course, didn't want to blow up their own job or marriage and never said
Sure.
anything. But I feel like
Mhm.
that's a layer that just got kind of glossed over.
It is, there have been questions about where she was going, but because she didn't actually book anything, they
Mhm.
really had no idea where she was going, and she contacted multiple cities, multiple towns
Yeah.
looking for stuff, and so it was
Mhm.
really hard to determine, because she'd never booked anything, where she
Yeah.
was actually headed.
Mhm. What I
Mhm.
think she discovered is that there were quite a few options, and she had decided to just drive as far as she could drive, and just
Mhm.
figure it out as she went.
Sure.
The boxes that were packed had been not unpacked. She was under a ridiculous amount of stress
Yeah.
with the amount of school and work hours she was putting in and homework and trying to be perfect with school. She just hadn't attended to that stuff. It didn't mean anything. She really was planning on coming back. The
Yeah.
friend that she called that doesn't know why she called her, she was calling her just to let her know that she was adding another layer to her story. She was just calling to tell her that there'd been a death in her family and she was taking off, and she was
Ah,
just
okay.
that was just another part of her kind of laying the groundwork for where
Mm,
she was going. That's all that was. But
got
and
it.
why she didn't just leave her a voicemail and tell her that, I don't know. Maybe she didn't have a voicemail set up, but I mean, now that would probably have been a text. But
Right, right, yeah, you think about how much different all of this would have been now.
yeah, totally. But I feel like that's what happened. I absolutely agree that she had stopped at a bar and got, connected to some people. I feel like they had recommended the route she was on. Like they sent her on that road knowing that she was inebriated, knowing that they had, done something to try to get that car to stop at some point. And
Oh,
yeah,
and also, it was very well known in that community that there was this, like, 19-mile stretch right there with no cell service.
right.
Several
Right.
people in one of the, documentaries I watched commented on that, and I thought, "Oh, so
Everyone knew that. Yeah.
that's why she was on that particular stretch of road when something went wrong, because they were looking for that because she couldn't call for help."
Yep, totally. I do believe that they took her back to some kind of a cabin. This looks
Mhm,
to me like a hunting cabin or
mhm.
some kind of I don't know that necessarily they lived there full time, but this was some kind of a cabin in the woods type I know that sounds so cliche, but I really feel like that's what it
I
was, you know?
I agree. I agree totally that that is exactly what it was.
Mhm, and the reason some of the alcohol was gone is because they took it with her. They were going to party, you
Right.
know? They were going to party, and yes, she had a raging, alcohol problem, I think so much worse than the people around her knew.
I do
She was
too.
trying to cover that, you know?
Yeah.
And I suspect that when her sister relapsed, that's why it upset her so much because she knew damn well she had her own problem to deal with, but
Yes.
didn't want to be the person that her sister had become for her parents. And so she was really trying to kind of have it both ways. I
Yeah.
suspect that dad has a drinking problem. That came up
I
for me.
I
That
have that
there's
impression from him as well that that alcohol is a has a
alcohol's an
really
issue in this family.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that there was a pretty heavy focus on alcohol in her life as a child, and that
Uh-huh.
that really is had come out.
Mhm.
And I so resonate with that with you that she was under such a huge amount of stress. She was breaking, and she
Oh
knew she
yeah.
was. She had to
Mhm.
get away for a little while and get
Oh
away from
yeah.
everything and everyone and figure out what she wanted out of her life. You know, there was all this
Uh-huh.
pressure around her, and she didn't really know what she wanted.
No, I suspect that what she was doing, obviously when she was at West Point, she wasn't where she needed to be, and she knew it. I feel like basically her whole life has been spent trying to please others and trying to
Yeah,
show up as much as humanly possible. And she had in so many extraordinary ways. But
yeah,
yeah, I agree with that. She didn't have a clue who she was and or what she
no.
wanted out of life. That part to me is very sad. I think it's sad for her dad, well, and her mom too, but for her dad because I do feel like there's a level of him that knows, that maybe
Well, her mom's
he
dead. Her mom died.
oh, is she? Okay.
Mhm.
Is
She had
is she
died not long before all this, so that's another
okay, I
major
did not know
stressor.
that.
I
Okay.
forgot, that was another of the stressors.
Uh-huh, that
Just
her
like
mother had died. Oh, geez.
everything was just sort of down on her head, you
Mhm.
know? She was
Yep,
just a young woman, it was a lot.
yep, and we have this military style dad that's like, you're a soldier, you just keep on marching, you just keep on going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that but, one thing I was hearing is that, when I looked into this case is that she had emotional issues in high school that maybe got kind of, brushed under the rug,
Yeah.
and that she really shouldn't have ever been at West Point.
No, no. The pressure of that was crazy, and
Mhm.
but it was obviously the thing that driven personality and that driven way that she'd been raised, just she didn't know when to say no, you know?
Right, right. Yep, she was never gonna do that. I feel like she was an extraordinary person. It's such a
Oh, yeah.
terribly sad loss, because
Mhm.
she really was. I really wonder if nursing really wasn't maybe the path she wanted to take, but that was the one that was kind of imposed on her. And
Yeah.
so there she was. I suspect that she was very good at what she did, and that
Mhm.
she was beloved where she was at. But yeah, I agree. It's really sad because obviously what was happening in her life was intense and intense enough for her to crack like this.
Yeah.
It's just extraordinarily sad that she ended up connecting with some really bad people that
Right, I mean, it was
capitalized on
literally
her.
wrong place, wrong time,
Yeah,
vulnerable person, and, all
yeah,
this other stuff in her life is interesting and kind of helps you know why she got there, but does it have anything to do with what happened to her? No,
no,
not really. I mean, she just was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I guess
right.
it does in a way because she was vulnerable at that time and
Oh
was
yeah.
identified as vulnerable by those individuals who took her.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Oh, I feel like she got a few drinks in her and had these men that were showing her some attention and asking her some questions, and she kind of spilled her guts. And I mean, it wasn't hard to see that this
Well,
person was
no, and
going to
here
be an
she's
easy target.
and traveling alone at night, she was vulnerable and in a car that everybody in her family said she never should have gone anywhere in that car anyway. The fact that it made it as far as it did was surprising.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was an easy target in that moment, sadly.
Hmm. Yeah, she was. So then I kind of got so a couple of things about these men. So a name comes really strong for me, Kevin or Devin. Could be a
Mm,
first name, could be a last name, but there's a name associated to these men, Kevin
mhm.
or Devin, and
'Kay.
Evan. but
Or Evan,
so
right?
or Evan, but yeah, but so So then I'm asking, have they done this before? Did they
Right.
do this again?
Mhm.
What I'm hearing is that one of them had done this before in another town, not where they were, but somewhere else with a cousin. And this was something that, that he had bragged about to the people in question.
Mhm.
And, it's really hard for me to get my head around why anyone would go, hey, let's go kill this girl. And there's a part of me that goes, maybe they didn't intend to kill her, maybe this was about rape and it went wrong, except
Mhm.
for that the one person involved that had been involved in other things, and he had been involved more in like date rape and gang rape, with a cousin who had that they had been roofing girls at bars.
Mhm.
So, but again, this was in another state. It wasn't where this happened. This was something, it was separate. But I feel like the other two men maybe had not been involved in something like this in the past, but he really, I suspect that at least one of them did not know was going to happen.
Mhm.
That he was just told, hey, we're going to party with her. That's kind of the extent of it.
Yeah.
However, I feel like this, when this happened and they actually ended up killing her, that there was a lot of fear associated. There were a lot of threats associated.
Oh, yeah.
I am not convinced that we won't get the truth out of this at some point. I suspect that. What I keep
Mhm.
hearing is that there will be a prison confession. You know,
Oh,
there'll be a
okay.
prison confession from one of them. I suspect the guy who actually didn't intend in being involved in this and ended up involved in it, that
Mhm.
he is or will be imprisoned for something else, and that he'll talk about this, whether it's to a chaplain or it's to another inmate or whatnot. But I feel like at some point the truth will come out. The
Mhm.
story will be told. Now, I have questions about, the credibility of it. Will we believe it?
Yeah.
Yeah, will. But I do believe actually that the tale will be told at some point.
Mhm. I do too. I This feels very unfinished to me, and I think that's why it keeps coming up, why there have been so many documentaries about it and so much written about it, is that it is unfinished
Yeah.
and that, um, it's not gonna go away until the story is told, until
Yep.
at least her family knows what happened to her, even
Yep.
if they don't know where she is. I don't know if that will happen, but at least that they will
Mhm.
know what
Yeah.
did happen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I feel like that is true. I the challenge I have with that is that I feel like her no answer is going to be enough for her dad.
Yeah.
He waged war on the police department.
Oh, boy,
He
he did.
filed lawsuits. I mean, he has, and obviously he felt like this was mishandled. And I don't know that it was or wasn't. I'm not really going to comment on that because I feel like, this was a very odd case that everyone was trying to do what they could with it. And I don't think this area had seen much of this kind of stuff.
No, they really hadn't, and in one of the interviews that I saw with one of the police officers, they said, "You have to understand that we just responded to a minor car accident.
Right.
This did not come to us as a missing person initially, and it
Right.
didn't come to us as potentially a murder. They just
Right.
called us out for a car accident, and the person that was in the car accident was seen by another person and seen to be physically okay."
Yeah.
And so
Well,
for
and that's it.
them, they're like, "Well, okay, she's an adult. She
Yep.
has the right to walk away from her life." And
Right.
I mean, you can still say though that the disappearances of women do not get taken as seriously as they should. And the
Absolutely.
idea
Absolutely.
that a woman just can't handle it anymore and just disappears, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, really,
Yeah.
because women are much more much are very strong emotionally.
Yeah.
And the idea that women just can't take it anymore and then just, walk off. I have actually
Yeah.
heard way more stories of men doing that were, true proven stories of men doing
Yeah.
that than I have of women. Women
Mhm.
have a tendency to not do that because of their emotional attachments to people. But
Right.
I do feel like there was some of that in this, that, well, this was just
Mhm.
an overwhelmed girl who wandered away. And then,
Mhm.
the mistake that dad made, and it's not his fault, it's just what happened when he alluded to the potential that this was suicide. That's really where they went with it. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, okay. So this was a suicidal kid who didn't
Mhm.
want trouble, so she walked off into the woods to protect herself.
Right. Yeah.
That hurt this case significantly because then
It did. And right. I mean, dad was just spitballing, he was just throwing out anything like what could have
would
happened,
it be? Yeah,
Yeah.
and he says in interviews that I've seen later, he says, I really regret that I said that because it
Mhm.
sent the whole investigation in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And it did. It definitely
Mhm.
did. But I mean, I cannot criticize a parent in that situation because I cannot imagine what I would do.
Mhm. Here is one question about this theory that I have maybe not a problem, but I think needs to be addressed. She was in a public place with other people. Why didn't anyone identify her? As there's been so many stories about her being missing and she was in that bar. Why didn't anyone come forward and say, "Hey, I think she was in this bar tonight"?
It's a small, close knit, everybody knows everybody kind of community, and it may have been that they just don't speak up. One of the people who they interviewed, who was a local community member, said, "We don't really trust the police here." And so I
Ah,
feel like there may have been some of that, and there may have been some of she wasn't in there that long. Maybe that
mhm.
not that many people saw her.
That's what
They
I wondered,
certainly
if not
didn't
many
go
people.
ask. I don't see anything in any of the investigation that I've studied that indicates that they went anywhere like that and asked. I don't think they did.
One thing that comes through to me actually is that the barkeeper, because I went, all right, other people in the bar, maybe they didn't see her. Maybe she was wearing a hat. I wondered if she was like wearing a hat and didn't look like who you would have expected that you were going to see. And people didn't really put two and two together. I actually feel like the bartender was one of the people involved.
Mhm.
And that's why a bartender didn't, because that would be the one person that you would think might say, hey, there was a girl in our bar tonight that was not who, you know,
Yeah. Someone
not
not from
someone we
here.
normally see here. I actually suspect that the bartender either was one of those men in the car or is associated to one of them.
Okay.
I do feel like he did know that she
Mhm.
was in the car in the bar, but was and was probably the only person that really would have recognized her or spoken up at all. That he didn't, because he was either, it doesn't fully resonate with me that he was one of the men in the car, but I gotta say that the word cousin comes up for me over and over and over in this case when I look
Mhm.
at these men. Was
Mhm.
he a cousin or a relative of,
Yeah.
these guys that had been talking to her? I suspect that.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, that
bartender
that
knew.
resonates with me that there was some
Mhm.
cover up of that. And
Yeah.
the family has believed that there's been a cover up the whole time.
Mhm.
And I feel like they're picking up on something, but they've put it on the police. But I don't think
Yeah.
it's the police.
I don't either.
But there's a lot of misinterpretation of people in this. There's lots of a lot of distrust of dad because he comes across as guilty. Well, he
Mhm.
is guilty. He was very hard on her and he
Yeah.
knew it. And here she took off, and I don't have any doubt that he has some doubts of his own about how he should have handled the car accident
Uh-huh.
or some of the other things that went on. I feel like there were some questions there
Right.
for him that he does feel guilty, but not because he
Mhm.
was involved or because he did anything to her, but
Right. But had
his own
he
actions leading up to it maybe have
right.
contributed to her taking off.
But had he busted her instead of covering for her when
Mhm.
she wrecked his car inebriated, which she was, maybe this wouldn't have ever happened,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But he was so determined. But I'll take that a step further, because I feel like he too had his own series of missteps as a kid and as an adult, and had his kind of, insulation, his family or his good old boys or whoever you want to, consider, that
Mhm.
covered for him,
Yeah.
to keep him on the even keel, to get his his accomplishments in his life. And I feel like that was very normal for him to do, to cover for his kids in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, I agree, and it was clearly something that had happened before for her, and so it was a bit of an expectation on her part.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it certainly wasn't his fault that any of this happened.
No, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. It's heartbreaking for him, and will be for his whole life. I
Oh,
mean, there's just
and her other
uh,
siblings, I mean, it's
oh
terrible
yeah.
for all of them. I cannot
Yeah.
imagine living for 16 years not knowing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's horrifying. It's horrifying. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, sadly, one of those cases of a vulnerable young woman who was preyed on by some men that were looking for a target, obviously.
Yeah, I very much think so, that they just saw her immediately as a vulnerable opportunity for them,
Mhm.
and that's where this went, and I feel like this entire time that they've been looking for her, I absolutely do feel that she's been gone the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, there's just no question that she hasn't been, you know,
Yep.
not
Gone.
like she's gone.
Mhm.
Which
Yep.
for her sake, I'm glad that that is the case, frankly,
Well,
that she didn't
yeah.
have to go through something else horrible, that it was quick, but well, that is our take on the Maura Murray case.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one, it is, and there are so many
Mhm.
theories, there's a lot of rabbit holes to fall down on this case, but I
Yeah.
felt like we should put a lot more of our, emphasis on the psychic side of things on this
Yeah.
case because the basic information is so well known. So I appreciate you playing psychic Q&A with me.
Oh, I like playing psychic Q&A with you.
Yeah,
And
we'll have
by
to
the
do it
way,
again.
next week we are covering the case of the Bell Witch. This
Ooh,
is a very old case from Tennessee. The Bell
yeah,
Witch is up to that time and maybe ever is the only supernatural being to ever be convicted of a crime.
it's wild.
So
So,
it
of course,
is
we have to
so
talk about
wild. Oh my god, I have so much to say about this case. So definitely tune in next week, or if you're listening to this, a million years down the road, be sure that you find our footage of the Bell Witch, or episode of it. It will be very well worth your time.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah,
Well, we want you to remember always to like and subscribe wherever if you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, wherever you are, like and subscribe. Over on Facebook, you can join us. Our fan page is True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters podcast. And then we also have the True Crime Paranormal discussion group, which is our Facebook group. If you want to come talk about this case or any other case that we do, or if you want to share ideas with us about what cases we should cover, we love to hear that from all of you. And
yeah,
also, we are on Patreon, and we really appreciate our patrons over there. If you would like extra content and to support us so that we can continue offering this podcast, then go become a patron at Patreon. And we're True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters on Patreon.
yeah. All
Yeah.
righty. Well,
Well,
sounds great.
thanks for being here today, Katie. That was a lot of fun.
It was awesome. Yep.
Yeah,
And thanks for choosing this case. It's been a great one to cover.
it has, most definitely. Well, I'm excited about the Bell Witch next week.
All righty. Well, everybody, thank you and take care.
See you next time.